Hey everyone, Lockie here. For those that are finding my channel for the first time, I basically am a wing foiler based in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm just trying to do my bit to share my knowledge and sort of document my progression in the sport. So as part of that, today I'm making a video about, I guess, the timeline of my progression in wing foiling. And I wanted to use this as a bit of a overall tutorial or guide on how to learn wing foiling. I'm just going to step through the different boxes I ticked along the way in learning the sport, and obviously always learning, so there's always something to work on, which is one of the cool things about our sport. For those finding my channel for the first time, aside from this video, I've got some other tutorials already uploaded, especially around switching feet, around tacking, and depending when you've found this video, I potentially might have a few more. Otherwise, if you've just found this video as it's coming out, the plan is to have some more tutorials released soon. But make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on those. So I've put together a rough timeline of my progression in the sport. So let's jump on the computer and have a look. So I guess depending on what device you're looking at, you might not be able to read that text overall, but these are the key points that I hit along my journey learning the basics of wing foiling. And when I say basics, that's, you know, foiling in a straight line, being comfortable at speed, being able to jibe, being able to switch feet, being able to tack, riding toe side, riding heel side. Yeah, they're sort of the key skills that I think everyone that is starting in the sport aspire to achieve, so that they can then go on to, I guess, more advanced skills. So I guess, yeah, the first thing, how to learn wing foiling. Obviously, there's many ways to do this, and the order that I did things in might not be the order that you do things in, but I just wanted to, running through what worked for me. So to do a quick overview of all these steps, the first one was learning to tow behind the boat. That was just board, foil, standing up, foiling behind the boat, getting comfortable with foot pressure and all that sort of stuff, learning to control the ride height of the foil. After that, I did a little bit of learning to handle the wing on the beach. So, you know, learning how to sheet in, sheet out, get power into the wing, that sort of thing. Learning how to flip it over when it gets flipped the wrong way. Yeah, just sort of the essentials. After that, basically just put the board in the water with the wing, try and get from your knees to your feet, and then start turning the board in the water, not actually up on the foil, but using the wing and the board at the same time. After that, learning how to foil in a straight line, so really not doing any maneuvers at this stage, just trying to get comfortable on my feet, get the right posture, get the right stance, understanding the foot pressure, understanding how the wing works. After that, started to learn the jibe. After the jibe, I started learning to switch feet. This was just sort of a natural progression, and I know this timeline looks quite linear, but in saying that, I got my first jibe and then started working on switching feet so that I could learn the different variations of the jibe. After switching feet, tacking, same thing, like not quite linear at this stage, working on the jibe, switching feet, and tacking sort of at the same time. But tacking came a little bit later than jibing. Yeah, and then after that, I'll just touch on different avenues that you can go down once you've got these sort of key critical skills. We bounce all the way back to the start. So we want to focus on towing behind the boat to start with. So if I expand this, I basically just put down 3 key things that I think are important for when you tow behind the boat. And the first of which I've said is rope length. So when I was learning to tow behind the boat, unfortunately, the anchor point was quite low on the boat and the rope was quite long, which meant that as you were coming up to speed, trying to get up onto the foil and holding onto the rope would actually drag in the water, and then the tension would come back on, pulling it out of the water, and it would sort of just slap, and then the tension was really uneven. So it added an extra level of complexity to something that was already quite difficult to learn. My advice for that would be sensible with the rope length. So obviously don't go too short, but err on the side of short and higher up if you can, depending on what you can attach it to, like where the anchor points are on your boat. If the anchor point is quite low, then potentially having a shorter rope will prevent that slap from happening and that inconsistent tension. After that, yeah, focusing on controlling the ride height. So just picking one thing to focus on as you're learning to foil. So as part of controlling the ride height is actually, like, before you even get up onto your feet, you're essentially, I guess, when you're learning to tow behind the boat, you can start on your knees, get to your feet as you have a bit of speed through the board, or you can just, if you've got a board with enough buoyancy, you can just start on your feet. I wouldn't necessarily say one option's easier than the other, but I think it's just important to have control over the ride height in either of those options. And the main thing you want to think about here is just keeping your weight over the nose without obviously submerging the nose and submarining the board. You want to keep the board on the surface of the water longer than you initially think. You don't want to let the board release from the surface of the water as soon as the foil engages, because you're going to be at a speed that's pretty close to the stall speed of the foil, which just means that you're likely to basically lift the nose of the board up, board will rise up a bit, and then it'll just crash. And then maybe you'll do that again and crash, but then you'll probably fall off the board altogether. That's the second tip, control the ride height. And that's purely just by that front foot pressure, you know, leaning forward to keep the nose just kissing the water, and giving the board and the foil enough speed to engage that it's not at its stall speed and it's not going to be unstable when you get up on the foil. Okay, and then we go back to the mind map. So the last tip I had for this one was it's all in the foot pressure. And this is sort of similar to the second point in terms of controlling the ride height, but I think it's just important to be conscious of where your feet are on the board when you're learning to tow, because there'll be a little bit of carryover to winging. The forces involved are slightly different, but starting to learn where your feet feel good on the board will translate pretty well to when you add the wing in and take away towing. Just learning to press on your front foot to stop the foil coming down, but also learning where your back foot sits on the board relative to the rail. Ideally, you don't want to be 1 foot on one rail, 1 foot on the other rail. Say if you're looking at the front of the board, you're controlling the roll of the board by stomping on this foot and then stomping on that foot and then stomping on this foot. You want to be using your body movement side to side to roll the board, not just foot pressure through this leg, foot pressure through that leg. So play around with different foot placements. Your board potentially will have foot strap inserts, so I definitely recommend for the front foot, try and start with that roughly where the front foot strap insert would be, and then the back foot have a play with shuffling it side to side, further back, foot further forward, and just start learning that that ideal stance for your setup. And it's going to be different for every setup that you have, or every setup that people have. So cool, so that's towing behind the boat. Again, this is just sort of a quick overview video. The plan is to make more tutorials for different stages of this, and I'm going to base which tutorials I make on what questions people ask me. So if there's something you specifically want more details on, just chuck a comment below and that'll help guide what videos I make, because at the end of the day I'm just making these to try and help you guys out, and if I can help the most people, then that's a win in my eyes. Cool, so next one is handling your wing on the beach. So let's do a deeper dive into what I've said here. So 3 things: flipping the wing, power on and off, and the punch. The punch will come up in a couple steps along the way here as well, but let's start with flipping the wing. I'll try and dig up some GoPro footage of flipping the wing and insert it somewhere here, if I have it. But basically, there's 2 key ways that I've seen people flip the wing. One involves probably less coordination and more strength, and the other is less strength and more coordination. So I've seen people flip the wing from the center handle at the front, and they just brute force one hand on the center strut. So one hand on the center handle, like the surf handle at the front of the wing, the other hand on the leading edge strut, and they just push. They're sort of turning and pushing at the same time to flip it over. And this one sort of fights the wind a little bit, and that's why it requires more strength, sort of less coordination, because you're just holding one, pushing with the other, flipping it over. And yeah, I'll try and chuck some GoPro footage over this somewhere just to clear that one up. And then your other option, which I originally didn't do for many, many months because I was just doing the brute force, you know, just flip it over any way possible. But this option is just so much easier. You basically work your way along the leading edge strut to the wingtip, so to the very, like the span on one side, and you sort of want the leading edge facing sort of into the wind, and you're going to be holding the wing at the wingtip with the surf handle sort of pointing to the wind, and then you essentially just sort of pick up the wing from the wingtip so that the wind fills the underside of the wing, flips it over, and as it flips over, it sort of comes around, and then you can quickly work your way along the leading edge strut back to the surf handle. Okay, so back to the mind map. So once you've mastered flipping the wing on the beach, and I think this is a really essential safety tip to learn to flip the wing on the beach before you get out in the water, because as long as you have the ability to flip the wing on the water, you'll be able to safely get back to the beach even if you can't foil. If your wing's upside down, then you can't use it. You'll just be paddling to try and get into the beach. So not an ideal situation to be in. The next one, power on and off. So power on and off is sort of what it sounds like. It's just learning that backhand controls the power. So pull in to add power into the wing, release your backhand to take power out of the wing. That's pretty much the details of them. As part of this, it's sort of also bringing the wing overhead or bringing it more vertical and having a play with that as well. One thing I will add to this is try and be in consistent breeze when you're learning this, because there's nothing worse than trying to learn to maneuver your wing on the beach when it's a super gusty day and everything's unstable. You're just sort of going to get thrown around, and you're not really going to get an understanding of what hand movements translate to what wing movements, because the gusts are going to be driving the wing more than your hand. Finally, the punch. The punch is an essential tip, because what you're going to find, no matter who you are, when you're learning to wing, especially when you're trying to pump up onto foil, you're likely going to be pumping with your backhand, trying to get up onto foil, not conscious of where the wing tipping relative to the water. You'll dip the wing into the water, and then the wing will just flip upside down on you, and you're likely going to get pulled and fall onto it and end up sort of jumping off your board into the water, sort of onto the wing. It's happened to the best of us learning how to wing, and it's sort of a rite of passage in the process of learning to wing. So, but the punch is the key move to counteract this. So the moment you feel that wing tip dip in, so say you got front hand, backhand, you punch. You're literally just punching away. It's sort of a down punch, which will help push your front hand up. And you want to practice this on the beach before you've gotten to that moment where your wingtip's dipped in the water and starting to fall. You don't need to dip the wingtip into the grass or into the land, because you don't want to damage your wing, but just learn that feeling of punching away, feeling the wing come up, and this will translate across to not just like preventing the wing from flipping over, but it'll translate to when you're trying to learn the tack, because that same movement, that punch and throw the wing, that's going to help you get that wing up overhead, ready for the roll behind, rolling into the tack. Anyway, we're trying to keep this video somewhat simple, so we'll finish handling the wing on the beach there. I'm sure you've probably seen a bunch of other videos on winging already, and there's definitely some really great in-depth detailed videos about this wing handling on the beach, even towing behind the boat as well. I just wanted to really bring it all together in one video of the timeline. So we'll step on to the next item. So stand and turn the board in the water. It seems like pretty straightforward. This is just talking about the stages before you actually get up onto the foil, and it's more about learning to have that connection between the wing in your hands and moving the board through the water. It's stand and turn the board in the water. My 3 tips for this were front foot first, use your wing, and remember the punch. So the first 2 are sort of more related to getting to your feet. So front foot first. When I was learning, I had this tendency to be on my knees and then try to like accidentally go to get onto my back foot and then try and drag my front foot through to get to my feet. But you really want to think of it just like a lunge. So similar to surfing, or similar to just doing a lunge. You'll be on your knees with the wing overhead, getting a bit of speed through the board. The speed will help you have a little bit more stability because the foil will be slightly engaged, and you'll go front foot forward. That'll get you into that lunge position. You'll use your wing, so that's the second tip. Use your wing over your head and pulling on that backhand a little bit, because that's going to help you go forward, but it's also going to help take the weight out of your legs as you're trying to get onto your feet and stand. So those 2 things will help you get to your feet. Once you're on your feet, this is just a reminder to remember the punch. So as soon as you stand up and you've got that wing overhead, you've started moving forward, you're going to start bringing that wing down a little bit to get a bit more power on. You're going to sheet on a bit more, and then you're going to forget where the wing is relative to the water. You'll potentially dip the wingtip in, but lucky for you, you've practiced the punch. You'll punch it away, the wing will come back overhead, and you won't end up jumping onto your wing. That's the next step that I had in my progression, was just learning to actually move the board through the water without actually necessarily being up on the foil. Next step, foil in a straight line. So we have a look at this one. Cool. So foil in a straight line. I think I'd basically start with favored stance in both directions. In saying that, so like favored stance, you can either take this as people refer to like regular and goofy. It's just basically whatever stance feels comfortable for you in both directions. So that might actually mean that, you know, one way you'll ride heel side, one way you'll ride toe side, or maybe it'll be you feel comfortable heel side in both directions, or you'll feel comfortable toe side in both directions. Just whatever feels comfortable to start with, learn to do that, because you'll build muscle memory really quickly in those favored stances. Just remember, eventually though, you'll have to start working on those non-favored stances if you want to have the ability to unlock all the variations of the jibe, unlock all the variations of the tack. The rest of the tips for this were basically build the muscle memory, go fast comfortably, and turn your board. So building the muscle memory just means that, unfortunately, things just take time. So you need to get time invested into your favored stances, into your non-favored stances, because eventually you won't have a favored stance if you've spent enough time doing it. Every direction, toe side, heel side, should eventually just feel somewhat natural because you would have put enough time into it. So can't reiterate that enough. Just trust that your body will eventually build that muscle memory and things will get comfortable. When you're initially learning, you'll probably feel like your knees will be bent a lot more than normal. There'll be a lot of muscle tension. You'll be burning out your legs a little bit quicker than normal because you're just not used to those feelings through your legs, and you're overcompensating for things, and it just takes time for things to feel natural. So you've just got to let that process happen, and eventually things will become more comfortable. So that is on the next step, go fast comfortably. So the last 2 tips here, go fast comfortably and turn your board, are sort of guiding you towards jibing. So go fast comfortably means that you want to learn to increase your speed, but you don't want to do it without control. So to learn to go fast, you need to sort of push that limit of feeling a little bit out of control, but don't go so far that you end up, throwing your foil through your wing because you've just tried to launch yourself out of the sky going the top speed that your foil will allow you to go. Build that up over speed runs, and the same way you build muscle memory in different stances, you'll build muscle memory in controlling your board at each speed that you progress up to with your foil. After that, turn your board. So I'm not saying jibe, I'm not saying tack, I'm just saying, go from upwind, somewhat upwind, to all the way downwind, and sort of do these S turns, just to learn that control of the board before you start adding in having to rotate the wing, having to swap hands with the wing, and dealing with going through the eye of the wind for attack, or, you know, turning downwind and having to go through dead downwind and drive through the wind. Cool. So that's learn to foil in a straight line. And those last two tips were set up in a way that they guide us into the next one, which is jibe. So basically, for those that didn't come from wind sports, a jibe is the maneuver that we do when we're turning downwind. Jibing's probably the easier of the two for most people, because you're not dealing with the wind hitting you in the face, and you're not really dealing with the whole bunch of drag from the wing, because it's when you're going into the wind for attack. Because you're going downwind, you're not really fighting the wind's actually sort of helping you through the maneuver. So my three main tips for this one were speed is your friend, you have time, and one thing at a time. So speed is your friend. This is where that last tip came in, of getting comfortable at speed, because essentially with the jibe, if you start the maneuver with that top speed that you've learnt to be at comfortably, then you've got the bracket of board speed from that top speed to where your foil stalls. And so say your foil stalls at 8-9 knots of speed and your top speed is 20 knots. You've got 10-11 knots to decelerate through the maneuver before your foil will stall, and that leads into the next point. You have time. So as long as you've started the jibe with the top speed that you're comfortable with, or, you know, somewhere around that top speed, then you're going to have all of that time where you're decelerating and using the glide of your foil to turn through. I see a lot of people, when they're learning to jibe, trying to rush, and if you don't know how to lean on your foil the right way and carve your foil the right way, and you try and force a carve really quickly, you can actually kill the speed in your board, and that'll just cause you to stall and crash. So really letting your foil carve through that jibe is going to be something that helps you a lot. There is lots of great jibing videos on YouTube, so go check those out as well. And yeah, if you want my take on it, drop a comment below, and I'll look at putting together my thoughts on jibing. So next one thing at a time. So I've got turning the board and turning the wing. So I think with learning a lot of these sort of skills, it helps to learn to sort of break the move into chunks and learn a chunk at a time. So this one's just 2 chunks, turning the board and turning the wing. You can learn to turn the board first by those S turns that we're talking about. So not even actually jibing, just learning to carve the board. Then next you'll learn to start carving the board dead downwind and pass dead downwind onto the new side. And I want you to do this by actually, potentially, if it feels comfortable for you, just either holding the wing with the front handle only and letting go of the back hand, and just like turning through the jibe and just letting the wing do its thing on its own. And just not actually trying to land the jibe, just trying to learn what that carve feels like. Because your first few attempts, you're definitely not going to learn the jibe. Some people take months and months and months to learn the jibe, others, you know, a couple sessions, but it just depends on what your background is and where you've come from, and what, you know, how comfortable you are with the prerequisites that I've sort of talked about already. And learn that chunk first of turning the board, not necessarily landing the jibe, sort of just holding the wing flagged out with the surf handle or the front handle, and just feeling what it feels like to let that speed and that glide just happen as you turn. After that, you want to add in turning the wing. So you would have eventually developed that muscle memory of turning the board that you're not really thinking about it anymore. You're not really thinking about that carve rate. You're just carving at the rate that you've learnt from practicing that first chunk of turning the board, and then add in turning the wing. And that's essentially both hands on the wing, starting that carve, letting go of the backhand, bringing both hands to the front, sort of letting the wing rotate downwind onto the new side, grabbing the back handle with your new backhand, sheeting on and sailing out of the jibe. And I know that sounds really easy. It's probably frustrating for a lot of people to hear, because it's definitely not that easy, but yeah, it's just a good way to learn things in chunks is my recommendation there. So on to the next one, we've got switching feet. At this stage, you start to learn things concurrently. I got my jibe, but I wasn't necessarily proficient at my jibe, or I hadn't learnt a whole bunch of variations of the jibe at this stage, but I'd started to learn to switch feet. And that's because to learn more variations of the jibe, you actually need to be able to switch feet. So if we dig into switching feet, we have, similar to jibing, speed is our friend. So I've got here speed equals stability. And then I've got take the weight out of your feet, nose up and shuffle your feet, and then front foot straps as a bonus tip. I have a tutorial on this, so I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. So you can see here I've got wing foil tutorial, switching feet, foil positioning, heel side tacking, and just tacking quick tips as well. That's where I'm at currently with my tutorials. Depending when you found this video, there may be a few more that have popped up as well. So if you want if you're at this stage where you learn to switch feet and you're just watching this video, go head over to that tutorial and it will help a whole bunch. Okay, so back to our mind map. So let's start with speed equals stability. So this is a little different to the way that I spoke about speed for the jibe. So speed for the jibe is all about having speed to burn off through the turn. So really, unlocking as much carb out of your foil as possible. For this one, we're talking about stability on, let's go back to the old bar karate, using the hands. So when we're talking about stability for learning to switch feet, we're talking about, say this is the side view of your board, you got your foil coming down here. We're talking about this stability, so your pitch stability, whether the nose of the board goes down, the nose of the board goes up, that sort of thing. If you're going fast, and your board won't be affected as much by small movements or small changes in your weight distribution in your feet. So if you have more speed, just practicing bringing your back foot slightly forward and then moving it back again isn't going to have as much of a detriment on the pitch of your board as if you were to try and learn to switch feet at a slow speed. I've just said find your comfort speed. It might not be that top speed that you feel comfortable trying to switch feet at. It might be like 3/4, but err on the side of more speed than less, because essentially the tail wing of your foil is going to be more locked in at that higher speed, and it's just going to help you learn to switch feet. Next one was take the weight out of your feet. I'm just saying, you'll see this in my tutorial as well for the rest of these tips. Basically bring the wing overhead, try and use the pressure of the wing to take as much weight out of your feet, because the less pressure you have through your feet, the less you're going to affect the pitch of your board when you're swapping your feet over. Cool. Next one was nose up and shuffle feet. So I won't go into too much detail. The full tutorial covers this, but basically when you go to switch feet, you're going to have a moment where both of your feet are at the front of the board. When both of your feet are at the front of the board's going to want to do this. So instead, when you go to switch feet, you want to go nose up, both feet at the front. That's going to go here, but not as much, not as bad. And then old front foot becomes new back foot, press, and the board will level out. That is a very quick version of what I cover in my tutorial. So if you want that in more detail, go check it out. Last tip, front foot straps. I rave on about this all the time. This sort of relates back to that muscle memory tip. If you have your front foot straps on, you're gonna have like a home position for your front foot to land in all the time. And that just means you'll dial in that muscle memory of what it feels like for your foot to always land in that position when you switch feet. Cool. So that's switching feet. Next, for me, I learnt the tack. Similar timing to learn to switch feet. So let's see what I have in store for the tack. I learned to switch feet similar time that I learnt to tack. So let's dive into the tack. The tack, I've got a few tips. Speed is a friend, and one thing at a time. And I've broken one thing at a time into chunks, similar to the way that I broke jibing into chunks. So for speed is your friend, it's the same logic as the jibe. If you start at a higher speed, you've got more speed to burn through the maneuver to prevent you from reaching your stall speed at the exit of the maneuver. Just leave it there because I've got the tacking tutorial that you can go and check out for that one. Cool, and one thing at a time, so same thing, let's break this maneuver into chunks and not try and just do everything at once. Let's just learn the chunks and then add them all together once we've built a bit of muscle memory in each sort of move. So turning the board The tack is a little different to the jibe. The jibe sort of feels like the carve rate varies a bit. For the tack, especially the first 3/4 of it, you lock in the carve rate. So you essentially start carving your board, and you can turn at that same constant radius through the tack. You don't even need to land the tack. You don't even need to actually get it through to learn your carve rate. So you can just carve the board through the wind. Start by even just like committing to the first half of the tack, getting head to wind, and then turning away. Your foil might stall once you get head to wind and you try turning away, but the crash won't be as aggressive as if you were to go the full way through the wind. Then you can actually start going the full way through the wind, and it'll the crashes might start to get a little bit more like sort of belly flopping, but on your back sort of thing. But that'll help you learn that locked in carve rate that feels comfortable. That's the carve rate that's not going to throw you off your board. The way that this could look is basically sheeted on, front hand, back hand on the wing. You're turning into the wind, maybe just drop that backhand early while you're learning the carve of the board, and just carve through the tack with just that front hand on the front hand on the wing. Cool. Next chunk to learn is rolling the wing. So I'd recommend trying this on the beach, and it's something that I sort of touched on a little bit before when I was talking about the punch, but essentially you're trying to learn how to land the wing on the new side. So the way that looks is essentially that you've got front hand leads, backhand lags, and you're sort of doing this little wave over your back, and you're trying to get it so the wing tip that's down close to the ground becomes almost like vertical above your head on the new side. I go into this in more detail and with some example videos in the tacking videos on my channel, so head over to those to learn about that. But yeah, to break that chunk down a little bit further, yeah, front hand leads, backhand lags, that's just talking about that roll. You want to hold on for as long as you can. That's my other little chunk. So really just using that shoulder mobility to get the wing behind your head, and yeah, practice the roll on the beach. The last chunk was just learning to swap hands. So once you get that wing overhead, dropping the backhand, bringing it to the front, and then old front hand becomes new backhand, and you're sort of landing in that toe side position depending what sort of tack you're trying to learn. But that's where the muscle memory from the earlier steps of foiling in a straight line and learning all these different stances will help you, because you're going to exit toe side, you're going to exit heel side, depending what variation you're doing. You might be regular, you might be goofy, all that sort of stuff. So that was tacking. After that, that's sort of the essentials for me. This is sort of the tips that'll get you to the stage where you can go out and have a really fun session just riding around exploring, and then from there you sort of specialize. You can go, well, let's see what's in this one. So for me, where to next? My progression sort of led, learning foil slides, learning the carving 360, I've started in the process of learning backwinding, fun little thing called starfishes, which I think people have different names for it, but I call it starfishes. Basically when you flip the wing upside down, throw it behind your back, and you sort of get blown downwind with the wing behind you. It's a really fun thing to do in strong wind. And yeah, just something different. And then there's the freestyle side of things, so doing aerials and, jumps and stuff like that. There's the racing side of things, trying to ride really small gear, small foils, big wings, and getting around a racetrack faster than the people around you. There's surf. There's a whole bunch of other things you can do with a wing as well. Wing upwind, deflate downwind sort of stuff. And the sport's ever changing, so there is always something new to do with winging, it seems these days. It's part of the reason that sport is so awesome. So cool. That is, I guess, the timeline that I wanted to cover. Again, it's my progression, it's what I went through, and it potentially look different for you. or it will look different for you if this is the beginning of your wing foiling journey. But I think it's a good little reference to look at if you're wondering where to go to next in your wing foiling journey. Cool, so aside from that, I just wanted to point you guys to a few different sources of information that I've been putting out into the world for wing foiling. So I've got my Instagram channel, or Instagram page, not really a channel, which looks like this. And yeah, I've got tips. They sort of just look like a bunch of information in the caption and a bit of a quick question, I guess. That's my Instagram. You can check that out for some quick tips on wing foiling, especially as you're trying to learn different things like tacking and switching feet. I've also got that playlist that I mentioned, which is growing. There'll be some more tutorials up soon. And then aside from that, if you guys can just let me know what tutorials you want to see next, and I'll have a crack at putting them together. I really just want to share the wing foiling knowledge that I have, and if more people get into the sport, then that is definitely a win in my eyes. I hope you guys enjoyed that little timeline of my progression, and yeah, thanks for watching.